Matriarchy. It's what lots of women are talking about now, and men are looking into it too. And today's episode is very much inspired by the women's kingdom of China. And I love that it's called women's kingdom and not queendom. And from contemplating all of this, I now see very clearly that matrilineal society is 100% the way forward. Firstly, because of how natural, how in alignment with nature it actually is, and where it can have a place for both men and women to be on it, weaved into it as part of it. And so I really don't see that there's a need to fear women taking over or being in charge in ways that disenfranchise men, since everyone, including men, are seriously suffering and struggling under current patriarchy. So it clearly doesn't work. And if we are to be fulfilled and sane in our lives, um, there has to be another way forward. And matriarchy is the term that everyone seems to know, but what we're actually talking about in this episode is matrilineal living. And it's inspired by a Chinese rural culture that has been there for thousands of years, where today's guest, Bodhi, is going to live and explore a mutual learning and appreciation, cultural immersion that can lead to evolutionary ways of relating in the Western world as well. So, if anyone happening to hear this is concerned or fearful about society having no structure or men losing out when patriarchy is no longer the social and family blueprint, then I honestly recommend to be open to listening in what it's actually really like in a matrilineal culture. Because in this functioning society that does already exist, and it's existed before patriarchy probably, the men there are relaxed and free, and they have different responsibilities than what those raised in the Western world cultures are used to. And today's guest, Bodhi Love, he felt unseen in the patriarchy of his Australian culture where he grew up. And from many men facing the pressures of capitalism, and for this man in particular, he's exploring what's possible, not just in a different location of the world, but also a totally different social system where women own the property and handle the money for the most part, and children remain living with their maternal line. And so Bodhi, his plan is to establish a retreat business where mutual learning can happen and mutual benefit goes both ways. And that's something that we talk about in this episode. And I have a question, an inquiry in the background as well, that for men that don't want to let go of patriarchy, because there are aspects to it that are beneficial to cultivating masculine energy, and but why could that not be implemented in a matrilineal context? It seems like it would just be totally possible if that were the decision. So, anyway, please do listen in on this first conversation that I'm having with Bodhi Love. And if you could help to share it with people that you know are interested in matriarchy and the matrifocal way of being, then please do pass it on. Welcome to this provocative and heartfelt podcast, where patriarchy is defined as a paradigm that both men and women uphold in different ways. Here you get to listen in on genuine conversations between leaders from around the world to discover more mutual respect and less division, as well as more pleasure and love in your life. My name is Devashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversations. And so, Bodhi, thank you so much for meeting me today and sharing about your really interesting journey. And I'd love to hear it in your words, but very recently you reached out to me and said that, I hope I'm getting this right, that you maybe have never really felt like you fit into the general patriarchal culture of the Western world that you're from, and you are changing your life to go and experience living with a matrilineal culture in rural China. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I've yeah. So without it sort of turning into my life story, I I went to China when I was 19. Um, and when I went to China, I experienced a kind of feeling of uh, belonging, as though there was part of myself that felt seen in China.
Hmm.
Um, and yet it's still it still felt as though I didn't truly belong in China, and I couldn't, um, you know, because I'm never going to be Chinese, no matter how good your Chinese gets or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
You're always a foreigner, and it's always a novelty when people meet you and stuff, which can be fun, but it can also be a bit draining. So I I came back to Australia and um, basically was trying to figure out where I fit in with everything. And since I came back to Australia, I've been looking for a kind of alternative culture, and I would call it communal living, I guess. So I traveled Australia with my girlfriend, and we eventually landed in the Northern Rivers. And that's when we started to sort of live in a commune or a community and experience communal living, which was probably it was a bit of a sanctuary for me because it was, you know, it's different. It's very similar to the kind of matrilineal culture that I'm exploring now in a lot of ways. Like, you know, in the fact that we share meals together. A lot of the money and practical aspects of life are shared. Um, yeah. So my my feeling of I mean, I think it's quite a common thing, to be honest. I don't think I'm special, um, in that, you know, the culture that I grew up in kind of feels like, you know, it's pitting everybody against each other. You know, I guess capitalism is
Yeah.
also worth a mention in this context.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yes, look, I grew up not far from the Northern Rivers area and spent a lot of years living there, especially in my late teen years and after that as well. And it is a really different, more communal culture for sure. But I'm really interested in your perspective as a man. And if we go back to what you were saying about a part of you felt seen in China, if you could name what that part of you is, how would you describe it?
Yeah. Well, first, I guess in China, there is this sense of um, we're all in this together because of the culture. It's very much like it's a little bit more intimate than it would be in Australia or Western culture. Um, for example, in Western culture or English speaking countries, being polite is something that we're all taught from a very young age.
Hmm.
Um, but in China, too much politeness can feel like distance, and it can you wouldn't do that with someone you want to really connect with. You know, it's similar in, you know, in all over the world. You know, like you get close to a friend, and then you wouldn't, you know, say you wouldn't be using polite words constantly to try and, you know, but
Yes.
it's somehow much more emphasized. It feels like a big family in China in a big way, and everybody's quite warm. Lots of people are quite warm, depending on obviously where you go. Every country has all sorts of people, but in general, China feels very much like a big family. And I guess the part of me that felt seen was this part of me that felt like it's ridiculous that human beings aren't working together, that we're
Yes.
all sort of, you know, pitted against each other, and everybody has to, you know, um, yeah, just you know, everybody has to. What's kind of proposed by society is study, get a good profession, earn money, have your own little box that you live in and your own bills and everything. And in a way, that's kind of the same in China, except for the fact that the economic conditions are such that it's not so much pressure. Um, Even though I think it's a growing trend all over the world that the cost of living is going up and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I guess it it feels like there is um, a very practical and down to earth kind of aspect to China.
Yes.
So I think that's the part of me that felt really seen.
Okay, sure, sure. And I hear you describing the difference of, the hyper individualistic focus in the Western world, which does have its advantages, I have to say, compared to, yeah, the more general communal, less individual focus of many Asian countries and even European as well, in part. Um, yeah, I would say that what you're describing is sounds familiar to me for many, many parts of Asia.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the capitalism factor is the main thing. I'm curious as well around your own curiosity and attraction to being in a matrilineal culture, um, in terms of how that would feel for you as a man and what that potentially brings up for you. I understand that you've already spent a little bit of time there, but your plan is to stay there a while, yes?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so um, basically, in my time in Australia, I was living in like I would call them communes rather than communities. It's a bit
Mm,
different. It's a little bit more intimate than a community.
sure.
So it's like living on one property, and it's literally like a family of friends. We sort of eat together every day, and there was a lot of meditation involved. You might even compare it to like an ashram.
Yes.
Um, and so in this context, to me, was the first time that I was able to kind of experience relationships within a context of like freedom and personal growth. And because I feel like relating as a man in patriarchal society and a patrilineal society, there's a lot of pressure. At least, I guess in Australia, the sort of not many people are that perhaps traditional, um, but um, in typically there's the pressure is that as a man you have to have your shit together, you have to be willing to provide and
Yes.
be able to provide
Mm,
and pay for a date, for example, and I'm completely on board with that if I take one example, um, for like I'm not adverse to this way, like to being a part of a patriarchy. Like
mm,
when I came to China the first time, I was like, wow, I could actually participate in society. This is actually like, it feels actually possible for me to. And it was the first time in my life that I thought, like, oh, I could actually do this whole, like, get a job, get married, and have a little family, and like, um, but basically, over time, it just never really happened for one reason or another. I wasn't willing to compromise on my freedom, and it felt in a big way that having, I've contemplated having children, and I'm getting married with one of my partners, and in the end, it didn't really happen. I think a big part of that was because just of my nature and sort of how my life has been.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so in this sort of communal living, everybody has their own space, and you're able to meet them in the in between, and you can sort of develop a relationship based on, um, you know, not being dependent, like the fundamental shared needs that we all have as human beings that looked after. We don't need to worry about rent
Mm-hmm.
or food or everything, all that's sort of taken care of being a part of the commune.
Yeah.
And so we're sort of freed up just to focus um, on this love connection. And so that for a long time was a beautiful way for me to explore a connection that wasn't influenced so much by the society. And so that's kind of been an obsession of mine, is trying to have my life free of influence from this society. And for a long time, it's been in communes and like sort of these sort of alternative properties. Um, but
Yes.
then but then comes the question, because I'm a man, and I'm growing older, and there's part of me that would love to have children. I you know I used to teach children in kindergarten, and I love kids. I love playing with kids.
Mm.
And it would be not only that, but there's also maybe something we might get into a little bit later with the act of lovemaking and sexual energy in general for a man, that I want to have children. Um, but within a community or a commune, it kind of doesn't. I'll put it this way: I have not seen an example of a commune or a community that um, that has that has an approach towards children, which is the best for the children and the best for the adults.
Mm-hmm.
I've if within a community a couple has some kids, basically it's still a patrilineal society. Nothing has changed, and the kids belong. It's still a nucleus family. The kids belong to the parents primarily. They might have other adults that can look after them and stuff like that, and that's great. It might be less pressure and less stress on these two adults, but still, what happens when those adults that are in that community move away and something changes? So it's still part of the same sort of system. It's still part of the same culture, and so for me, it what comes to mind in this situation is blood is thicker than water.
Mm.
I've watched my sister. Um, she was originally in the Northern Rivers, and moved up this way for the community and for the beautiful people that lived up there. And she had a son, my nephew, and not only her, but I see in many situations in patrilineal societies where there is immense pressure and stress on these two, adults to look after their kid.
Yes.
And in China, I guess traditionally they have like Confucian values, where they say that the whole family kind of lives together. That's the way it used to be, and the grandparents would be there to help and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
And that's kind of the way that my sister ended up going. She had to move back to Melbourne, where my family is, and my dad and my
Mm-hmm.
mum, to sort of have grandparents,
Yeah.
and more support in order to yeah to have an enjoyable life, and also the best for the kid, best for the children.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Sure.
yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah. There's a lot in there, Bodhi. And
sure,
I
sure.
I want to break some of that down with you. Yeah, and I want to start off by saying that I have experienced commune living myself quite a while ago, so I do understand what you're saying. Um, And I've noticed that a lot of the men that are drawn to that way of being, that way of living, are often really gifted in ways that are not always, commercially viable, let's say, in the broader context of society. So, they might be really gifted artists, musicians, and, also builders,
Sure.
all kinds of things, right? So I can see the attraction to being the kind of man that, maybe it can work for you, like you said, you can uh, adjust to the status quo of mainstream Australia. But I'm getting the impression that you don't feel like you would thrive in that scenario. And so you've explored elsewhere. And I want to ask you with that, actually, what was the paradigm that you grew up in? How did you experience, what was your conditioning as a man from the men in your family and women?
Yeah, okay. Um, so my parents are musicians, so that
Uh-huh.
might be worth mentioning. So they're
Yeah.
kind of, I guess from my dad, what I received was um, a lot of a lot of wisdom, like that was non-verbal, that was sort of, sort of communicated via vibe and via, metaphors
Hmm.
and stuff. Um, and there was definitely love, a lot of love in my family. But then I also, my dad was somewhat absent because he was just his job. He was a musician and he was a truck driver. So
Okay.
between those two jobs, he was pretty busy.
Yeah.
And I basically, my parents split up when I was about um, 13, I think. Yeah. And then I moved into a house with my mum and her new partner, my stepfather and his two daughters and my sister. So it was like a house full of teenage girls and myself and my mum. And my
Mm.
connection with when I was that age, my connection with my stepfather wasn't um, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. Like I didn't really feel seen in the house.
Sure.
Um, and as well, I think it was because my dad sort of understood this creative part of me because perhaps he kind of helped instill it. And so when I moved into this new situation, I felt quite isolated in a way. So from a very young age, I've kind of been on my own path and needed to sort of figure things out by myself.
Mm.
Um, as well, on top of that, when I was 15, I had quite a life-changing experience, and that sort of began my journey with meditation and spirituality. Um, and so that was definitely the beginning of my feeling like I didn't fit in with the rest of society.
Okay.
But I think the fact that I grew up in a house full of sisters was quite formative, if that's the word, I think. Um,
Yeah.
it definitely, it basically had me, well, for one, every now and again, I had to separate myself and be like, okay, there was always a lot going on in the house, and sometimes I just had to be by myself, and that's kind of how I began practicing meditation quite a bit. um,
Mm.
but also, um, yeah, also I was sort of faced with this question of, being surrounded by so much feminine energy. I was kind of always asking myself the question of what is it to be a what kind of man are women looking for? What is it to be a good man, a quote unquote good man? And that kind of question was always sort of bubbling away in the background. Um, and that's sort of, I guess, the beginning of um, and coming back to what you said about communal living and the kinds of men that are attracted to that kind of way of life,
Mm.
and if I could put it in my own words, um, uh, it feels as though it's going in the opposite direction to, say, being able to make money, and yeah, it's going in the opposite direction to a 9 to 5, or
Yes.
to making a lot of money in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it's definitely in that case for me. Um, and I've always had my own ideas about the society that I grew up in, especially from when I first had a spiritual experience when I was 15. Since that time, I've sort of lived with two frameworks of reality side by side.
Hmm.
What one is the way that the world is, like my understanding of the way that the world works, as in the society, the economy, um, politics, whatever, and grouped in all that perhaps is all the conspiracies and all the things that people can explore. And then the other side that I had from, I think I owe it to my experiences with meditation, is the way that the world would be if love was allowed to flow,
Hmm.
and if if we were uninhibited and things were naturally, what would things naturally be if not for some kind of abnormal or fearful influence or whatever.
What becomes the priority when it's not commerce? When it's not about uh, trying to be the king of the castle in the
Mm.
patriarchal context. And, it sounds like it's a natural alignment with the matriarchal, matrilineal values. And you've spoken about that already with family, with children, with the more inner life coming into focus instead.
Yeah. Um, for me, the priority has become, and at first I didn't have words for this, but I've been on the path for a while now. For me, it's a life that is living in harmony with nature.
Yeah.
To me, that is true freedom. Um, a healthy body, a healthy earth, healthy relationships, um, things that aren't, str- um, you know, I do feel that in a lot of ways, and over time, I've come to understand, to me, the roots of a lot of humanity's problems is this patrilineal system that
Yes.
we all have for some reason. I'm not sure why. It feels in my life now, it feels a little bit like a conspiracy. Um,
Yes.
because it's like it sort of skews the um it skews things to make it so that nice guys finish last.
If you are a woman, I want you to know about the work I do when not speaking on this podcast, which is all about how to live from your embodied womanly presence for your health on all levels, as well as it being a feminine spiritual path in itself. And it has a way of effortlessly unlocking your unique gifts to be a voice for women in the way that you are called to do so. And this happens through a facilitated training called Women's Somatic Sovereignty Certification. It gives you the chance to restore your own female nervous system, which I specialize in, while gaining the skills to be an effective somatic professional supporting women to thrive. come to one of my free workshops to know more about this. We have a fantastic community of women to learn and to grow with, which has been going strong since 2005. So see the links below this episode for more on certification training.
And so it's
Yes.
this like constant struggle between, you know, um, and everyone sort of um, subscribed to the system to a certain extent, out of necessity or out of choice or whatever.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, so for me, I guess I've never been I've always been seeking um, what is what is the real essence of um, of the of the problems that I'm facing, and where are the roots? Because I know, if you don't cheat the roots, then you're just kidding yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that has led me to, yeah, and as well, I think initially, um, you know, I have never wanted to compromise my truth for money. I think that came um, from being a musician and the whole idea of like your artistic value and sort of selling out. Um,
Yes.
but that value has sort of spread throughout my life in general, and that's led me on a path of seeking, um, yeah, sort of trying to seek a culture um, that doesn't create problems. A system that doesn't create problems that need to be fixed later on. So in a big way, it might be that um, a patrilineal, a patriarchal culture is very good for the economy. And in a way, we kind of know that it's very good for um, very few people at the top. It's kind of inseparable from, uh, I wouldn't even call it capitalism, really, because capitalism is supposed to be something that in reality it's not really. I mean, what we have is just like financial tyrants. Um,
Mm.
uh, and anyway, um,
Yeah, I hear you. It is more than that. It's like the authoritarian elite, so-called elite pirates
right,
at the top. I hear you, and I see capitalism and patriarchy in the way that we know it and speak to it on this podcast is all part of the programming within that greater authoritarian rulership. Um, Yes, yes, and just to go there a little more, if say more feminine or life or inner life values were more central, um, it could be possible that that could also be economically abundant, but it's such an enormous shift in priorities, and uh, obviously the people at the top don't value these things, don't care about that. And so it's not going to come from them.
yeah, it's it's definitely not going to come from them.
That's right. That's right. It's more of an anti-life agenda.
If if I could speak to that a little bit,
Sure.
because throughout my relating with the women in my life and lovers, and also just being um, a part of the society I grew up in, I've always been um, trying to understand why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, um, and also not not kind of judging what I'm feeling, not thinking that um, I should or shouldn't be any which way. I've kind of accepted whatever is coming up, but then going to the root and trying to understand why it's like that. This typical idea of good and bad, um, uh, like a good person is has compassion, and a bad person has a heart full of anger. If I have a heart full of anger, I don't reject it. I have a heart full of anger, and I'm listening to this anger, and I go to the very source of where it's coming from, and I say, oh well, that's valid. So why isn't that why am I encountering this problem? And in this kind of introspection, I've come to sort of see the roots of a lot of problems having to do tracing back to the fact that patriarchal culture or patrilineal culture, which I think it's important to sort of maybe discuss these words a little bit.
Yes, I
Um,
can imagine people listening might want you to break it down what you mean what's the difference of those?
sure. So patriarchal means that patri means like fatherly or man, and archal means to rule. So it basically means men's rule, like, man is ruling the roost. Patrilineal just refers to the family line being traced through the men in the family, which is
Yes.
sort of what we're all accustomed to in Australia, at least, all
Yes.
over the world, really.
And
Um,
I'll just add in there for a moment, Bodhi, that the men that would like to say that patriarchy doesn't exist um, and that there's nothing wrong with a patriarchy with men having leadership, but it doesn't just mean men having leadership. It means what you just said, which is ruling the roost, and that's not a mutuality with women or with the feminine in this case.
sure. Yeah. I'd say that patriarchy is the consequence of patrilineal uh, family system.
Yeah.
My understanding is that a patrilineal system incentivizes pride. I was thinking about this yesterday, and it kind of incentivizes the seven deadly sins.
Mhm.
Like, number one, it incentivizes pride because, you know, it's your children and it's the man's family name, and it sort of puts this emphasis on genetics. It has this, um, and it's an interesting thing when we talk about matriarchy and patriarchy, and this is what inspired my wanting to go and see this community in the first place,
Yes.
here in Yunnan, was because people use these words, but I'm always asking, yeah, but what is this? Like when people talk about matriarchy, for example, what does that even look like? What is a matriarchy? Is there an example? Um,
Yes.
because I think a lot of people's idea of matriarchy, um, women and men, is a kind of projection from within a patriarchal culture.
Yes. That's right.
It's not a you know um, and I think to arrive at a real matriarchy, it begins with a matrilineal kind of family system. Um, I just think it's much easier to explain to people by giving them just the an example of what a matrilineal society actually looks like.
Yes.
Um, and I just think that, well, from what I observe from my own experience, a patrilineal society incentivizes and produces certain kinds of men, and I guess um, the focus more so is really on men,
Yes.
as far as I'm concerned in this conversation, um, because women are constantly kind of in touch with what they're feeling a lot of the time, and we wouldn't be having this conversation if it were not for women who feel like something's not right,
Mm.
um, and it's not. It's
Yeah.
it feels very much that a patrilineal, to me, a patrilineal style of family system goes against nature.
Yes, it does.
It's a kind of imposed idea upon reality. For what reason? Maybe out of fear, maybe wanting to control,
Yeah,
maybe it's pride in, maybe, people have said it's private property is the source of all these things. Because here I am as a man, and I look at what I've accomplished. I've got this big piece of land. I want to make sure that this land goes to my son. So it's based in this egoic thing. It's
that's right. That's right. And 4,500-ish years ago, before patriarchy, even though that, came in at different points, in different places, the land was representation symbolically of woman, of the feminine, and everyone pretty much was matrilineal. And like you're saying, that's is in harmony with nature, down to the actual mitochondrial, scientific, cellular level, because lineage is passed through the mother, through the woman's body, not the man. And so to decide that it comes from the man is, yeah, exactly like you're saying, something superimposed over natural reality. And so that's where, the divorce from nature or the natural way starts. Um,
right.
yeah,
Yeah. I think if there's anyone, if there's any men who are listening and kind of um, aren't still convinced on the value of a matrilineal system over a patrilineal system, to me, the most significant value in a matrilineal system is that, and I guess this will segue into sort of a practical understanding of how the community that I'm talking about in specific, other ones I don't know about, how their family is actually structured and how it actually works. Um, because it basically, the way their system or the way their family is structured means that children who grow up have a far more stable home. They have a
mm,
huge family, and they have not one, but many father figures and mother figures and many adults looking after the children. And to me, from what I've witnessed and from what I can sense intuitively, it not only leads to more freedom for men, but it leads to um, more healthy human beings.
yeah,
Whenever these children growing up needed love, they received it because there were an abundance of adults who were there able to provide. And it
yes.
wasn't only on just this nucleus family, this one mother and this uh, one father.
That's right. That's right. And I don't think anyone could argue with the reality that children need to be with their mother. And up until a certain age, it really is totally in alignment with nature for that to be so. And to have, a few generations of that maternal support available is an incredibly stabilizing, nourishing influence, like you're saying. Um, and I wonder if, the men that are saying, well, not all women are healthy, but imagine how much more healthy women would be if they were properly centered, if, life and creation and children and family were more of a focal point, um, for the way of life. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I think what you're saying really resonates with um, the part of me that feels like a lot of the talk about matriarchy and patriarchy, it ends up being this kind of battle of the sexes.
yeah,
Um, whereas, you know, um, it's not, and that's just kind of like a projection from a
totally.
patriarchal culture, which is
Yeah,
just like, oh, women could do this job. better, but it's not that at all. So I think the root cause, the root of it all is this. Okay, so I feel like explaining the way that their family is actually structured would help um, illuminate what I'm trying to say a lot better than any kind of explanation.
Yes.
So in the Warsaw people's family, they basically you're growing up, and they have first of all they have it's a big family. A young girl comes of age, and she is allowed. She then moves to a certain part of their house, and they have a big house with a courtyard. And so she has her own independent space from the age of when she's coming of age. And um, basically, then she's free to have lovers. She can have lovers. Um, she eventually they have something that's called a walking marriage. So what that means is instead of when two people get together and they get married and they have their own house and they live together, instead she will stay, everyone stays with their mother, as in the mother, the main um, the main the head chief of the family is the grandmother, and she is and as well her daughters and the oldest women in the family, they are basically the ones who they inherit the property. It always stays with the women, um, and they decide what happens with the money a lot of the time. Um, and for me, as a spiritual man, feeling like I I don't like as long as the most fundamental parts of life are being looked after, which to me is children. Like,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
it's like what we all come from. And what produces good or bad humans is our childhood.
Mm.
Um, as long as that's being looked after, that's a good use of money. Um,
Yes.
and it's just like it feels like a natural incentive that women are in charge of that because it's sort of within a mother's nature, and that's what they do. It's not an effort, it's not a discipline. It's just something that is alive inside them.
That's right.
Um, so when a child is born, say I as a man, I'm having a walking marriage. So um, I meet a woman. She's from another family, and we like each other. And she lets me know that she likes me, and then I go to visit her at nighttime. Basically, I go in, and her room as a young woman in their family is positioned in such a way that it's convenient for lovers to visit. So the lover visits in the evening, and there's this whole kind of romantic tradition that they have that you climb up the house and enter in the window, and it's there's this thing that they've made out of it all, which is quite cute and beautiful. Um, but basically, when we have a child, as a man, I have no uh, responsibility. I also have no rights to that child. That
Mm.
child belongs to that woman's family, that woman and that woman's family.
Mm.
Now, some men might think that's like very hard to accept. And within our society, I can completely understand. But what that does to a relationship is it means that making love and getting married, a walking marriage in this case, because throughout the day I will spend it with my family, supporting my mother, sorry, and my sisters and my
Yeah.
brothers. And then in the evening, I go and find my lover. But what that means is that their um, their connection with each other is not polluted by this pressure of having to, provide for, as a man, of having to provide for a family, or the stress of sort of the question of whether or not we want to keep this child, whether or not we can keep this child,
Mm.
um, and and instead it sort of frees up the connection to be just about the fact that we enjoy each other's company, that
Mm.
it's pure. And what I've witnessed, and what, the questions that I've asked and the answers I've received, is that this incentivizes a different kind of relationship and a different kind of man.
Yes.
It basically, the kind of man that is most um, appreciated in their culture and is the highest kind of man is the one who can make women laugh, the one who's creative, the one
Mm.
who's the one who's going to bring positive positive things, you know, because this woman has everything. She's got, her family will look after her, everything else. She, you know,
Yeah, really
um,
interesting, Bodhi. So most people that struggle in relationships, which, let's face it, is most people, um,
sure.
in the wider westernized world, or just patriarchal cultures, survival pressure, is often
Yeah,
major thing that causes so much discord and violence and divorce and the pressure and the stress of operating in a type of society that at the root is based on what's not natural. Um, and individual people operating outside of their naturalness colliding together is a bit of a recipe for disaster, isn't it? So if people can
yeah,
imagine what it's like to have all of that survival pressure and stress removed, and yeah, the authenticity of connection and the flourishing of who you really are as a person. And let's focus on men for a moment, because there are really alarming stats of male suicide and, a really intense problem of male violence all over the world. And all of this is an attempt, um, I don't know how you would describe that, Bodhi, but it's an attempt to deal with, the status quo, which doesn't actually work for them. So while it would be an enormous shift for men to embrace the culture that you're about to go and stay with in rural China, uh, I think that men can't really argue with the downsides of patriarchy as it is in the wider world.
yeah. I think it's yeah, it's it's definitely a completely different way of life.
Yeah.
Um, but you're right, I think it's never been clearer to at least Western societies that the limitations and the unforeseen consequences of patriarchy.
Yes.
Obviously, within our culture, you know, it's not as if um, I want to make it clear that it's not as if you know um, I do think that it's possible to have a beautiful patriarchy, but it requires all those things that like they're sort of trying to do it or proud of doing it in China with Confucian values, and it involves discipline, and it involves this kind of strength and steadfastness. And why does it require those things? Because you're trying to do something other than you're trying to flow against the river. You're trying to swim against the flow of the river in a way. Um, so even now in China, where where the family values are very strong, um, it's the same situation all over the world. Even in China, there are people who I talk to about matrilineal societies, and they're equally as interested, and
Y-
it's happening. The time is ripe in a big way.
Yes.
Um,
I'd have to
mm,
disagree with you, though. I don't see how patriarchal society can be all that beautiful. I get what you're saying around certain cultivation of masculine energy within it is good, can be beneficial for men, but I don't see how it's beneficial for men on an evolutionary level when the mutuality with women isn't there.
yeah, you're probably right. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just a theory, um, but I haven't seen it, so I'll put it that way. I haven't seen it in my lifetime. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but I think, in a time when families actually lived together, so you had, um, like in China, it's quite common, um, that they have big courtyards where the grandparents live, um, and there's
Yes,
lots of brothers and sisters and big families and stuff like that.
yes.
Um, mm,
That
but
describes
it's
traditional Bali as well. But it is very patriarchal. A young woman in Bali in 2026 from a traditional Balinese family, she can't even she can't make many decisions about her own life, her own destiny without male approval.
mm, yeah,
And
yeah,
that
yeah.
could be a good thing when there's, a benevolent, protective influence. But when it goes to the extent that she just actually has no autonomy and independence.
Mm,
For example, she can't even decide to get her own passport and go traveling without a man in her lineage approving of that.
mm,
And that's just
yeah,
one thing that there's many things, that there's a problem with violence in Bali, I believe, as well. And the children always belong to the man in the end. So women really aren't able to thrive in a structure that's patrilineal, from my observation and experience.
sure, sure, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, yeah, I think maybe, um, I yeah, for me, I feel like this it's such a natural feeling way of life, the matrilineal society, that it feels very strange to think to do it any other way in reality. But
yeah,
it's not a dichotomy either, for me at least. It's not like I'm choosing, women over men or something. For me, it's always been about freedom.
yes,
Um, and my own understanding of, uh, men and women is, in general, at least my own experience, freedom for me is the highest value. It's something that's the most important, that,
yeah,
I'm willing to die for it as a man.
yeah,
And from freedom, and searching, and maybe everybody has their own idea of what that means for them. From freedom, I've arrived at love,
mm,
and connection with, and nature. I
mm,
like, something that's natural. To me, that's, true freedom. It's not
yeah,
being hyper individualistic, and having
yeah,
lots of money, and because if you live within that society, it's like, the way I understand it is, if I can use, because I used to be, have a lot to do with gardening. So if you have
mhm,
a garden, I think gardening is a beautiful metaphor for these sorts of things, um, for life.
yes, mhm,
If you have a garden, um, and if you have an objective, you want to grow lots of food, um, there's lots of ways you can do it. But whatever you do requires that, like, the extent that how much action you have taken in that garden is equivalent to how much action you will need to continue to take. in order to keep that system running. Like the amount of effort you put into to a system is how much effort you will have to continue to put into that system in order to maintain the system. But there are methods of gardening which are, do nothing gardening, right? Where instead of using all this effort, you walk around and you throw seeds, or maybe you make clay balls and the seeds are in the clay ball so that when it rains, the seeds naturally sow and they naturally germinate. And you're not doing very much. It doesn't require so much maintenance and it's much more in harmony with nature. And the yield is also comparable, if not better, sometimes than a system that is um, basically an idea imposed upon nature and this garden in order to produce food, in order to do something. So the question for me is, where is this motivation coming from to want to try and I think it's it could just be the consequence of the age we're living in. We're living in a time where there's a lot of confusion and there's
Yes.
Kali Yuga or whatever.
Yes,
um,
definitely. Yes. And it's been
I,
said plenty of times on this podcast, but it's definitely worth saying again in this episode, Bodhi, that the part of that confusion and that um, you know, battle of man against woman type of thing, it's just the confusion that people have that matriarchy or matrilineal society is the opposite. And it's women on top, women in power over men. Like it's a reverse of patriarchy, but it's actually not. That's just, as you say, the projection from inside that power model of patriarchy. And there's
yeah,
a film called Ladies First, which I saw recently, and I really do recommend people to watch, currently on Netflix. And it shows women on top in reverse, and it's comedy, and it's good to see, just to point out the level of sexism that's already there. But in reality, uh, matriarchy or matrilineal society is not about, it's not even woman centric. It's not women on top. It's not that same old power pyramid model. It's just as you're saying, it's life. Life
yeah,
itself,
it's
creation, nature, the earth, family, children. It's not even woman centric. It's just a
exactly, yeah,
different set of values, right?
absolutely, yeah. And it might help to put the flip side to what I was saying about the child belonging to the the woman's family. If I have a child with a woman in a matrilineal society, the child that we have belongs to her and her family. I still have a connection with this child. I can
Yeah.
still go there and people they still send gifts and give them money on their birthdays and things like this. You have a special relationship with this child, but you have no responsibility and no rights. But you do have a responsibility as a man to look after your sister's kids.
Okay.
Basically,
Interesting.
you're
Yeah.
the, and so which is very interesting for me because um, and this is sort of further confirmed for me the how it feels natural to be in a matrilineal family system because I feel a natural sense to be a father figure for my nephew, you know,
Mm,
and it's something that I don't know what it is. You're related to this kid, and he's your sister's son. He's part of the
yes.
family,
Yes.
and if you have a heart in your chest and you're in the same room as him, you can't help but be that kind of role model for him. It feels natural to me.
This is
Um,
really interesting, and I'm so happy you named that. And not that, you wouldn't have a instinctive response to your own child as well, but what I hear you talking about there, Bodhi, is, we could call it mitochondrial lineage,
Mm.
matrilineal is the same, right? So that instinct, uh, way deeper than the conscious mind level of reality, like this is that impulse where it's coming from. It's the mitochondrial connection.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
whether it's culture, the society in China that you've connected with, whether or not that is the ultimate model or not, it's just the fact that it's real, it's here, it's happening. It's how long have they been living that way, actually?
Yeah. As far as I understand, it's thousands of years.
Okay. Okay.
Um, there are people that I think their history is that they migrated over hundreds of years from Tibet,
Mm,
and they're in this kind of plateau area. If you imagine, the place is called Lugu Lake, and so there's this really big, beautiful lake, and um, it's surrounded by lush green mountains,
mm,
and they have this really one big mountain, and it's called the Gomu Goddess Mountain, and
mm,
basically all their names for things are like motherly in nature. They're not only so I learned a few words in preparation for this conversation.
Please know that whether you are a man or a woman or a couple listening in to this podcast, you are welcome to get in touch about private mentoring, where I can personally support you to unlearn patriarchal sex, to establish yourselves together in the beyond, which is the most natural yet evolutionary way of exploring intimacy together, increasing the pleasure, the love, the fulfillment that you get to have as man and woman. Whether you're beginning this journey or whether you're already quite advanced, you're welcome to talk with me on a free connection call to see whether a confidential, private mentoring process is right for you. You can find the connection call links in the show notes. Yes.
Um, so not only are they a matrilineal um, society, they are a matrifocal society,
Yes.
which basically means that their culture and their religion reflects this kind of devotion towards the feminine and the motherly, um, as well being the matrilocal, which means that when everyone stays with their mum in the mother's family, they live together. They don't go off and live with the father um, in your own little house or in the father's family, which is
Yes.
typically the way that things would go in say traditional China, at least when they
Hmm.
had big families and stuff. If you get married, you go and join the father's family, not the other way around. So that's um, matrilocal or patrilocal.
Yes.
Whole bunch,
And
whole bunch
something
of
that,
new words.
yes, yes, I know these words. And something that really stands out is that it's another way of saying God is female, which is extremely different from the patriarchal religions. And that can be offensive and a lot for people, some people to wrap their minds around. But in the natural world, when woman's body is the giver of life, before patriarchy, this was the understanding that everyone had actually. And the reverence for the feminine came from that place. And while I personally experience, the prime creator, which we call God, as beyond gendered, of course, there is this innate, unmistakable role that women and women's bodies have in the creation of life. Like it just is. Um,
Yeah,
argue with it all you like.
yeah. Well, yeah. I can put that in my own words as a man.
Yes. Yes.
um, because to me, um, uh, every 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 idea that we have about God will fall short.
Yeah.
Um, and basically, to me, a lot of the time when people talk about masculine and feminine, they can't help but hear of the man and of the woman,
Mm.
which in a way is true. Um, you can say that a man is the physical manifestation of masculinity, but he is not masculinity. Like,
Mm.
masculinity is a principle, just like
Yes.
femininity is a principle,
Yes.
and men and women have masculine and feminine, that's it's just a principle of life, in
Yes.
in duality. So quite often people, um, I find when talking about these things, they get quite caught up and feel put in a box about what it is to be a man when talking about masculinity, or what it is to be a woman when talking about femininity. Um, and it's different in China. They use the words yin and yang,
Yes.
um, to mean these things. So it's much more clear that it's a principle that we're talking about rather than men and women.
Yes. I like
Um,
that much more. Yes.
right, but young, young or masculinity is kind of like a form, a structure, which is, there's obviously immense value in having a structure and having form, but without the space on, say, if you've got a piece of paper in front of you and you want to draw a shape, the shape itself is masculine. It's the form. It's a structure. But without the space, you couldn't draw anything on that. Without a blank page, you couldn't draw anything on that. And so it's like God cannot be one thing. It cannot be, say, for
Yeah.
example, a being in the sky, which is kind of some weird delusion that we've inherited. Maybe at some point someone actually believed that. I don't know if these days people do. Um, but it's
Men.
just so
Men did.
stupid. Well, yeah, I mean, maybe it was just convenient and a way to sort of give themselves authority or something, but it's just so stupid.
Exactly.
Um, but it's the only real way to have to enter an experience of God, or to know God, is to get your own ideas out of the way,
Mm.
right? It's
Mhm.
you can't project onto something. You have to be honest with what you know and what you don't know, and what you don't know, you have to leave it open. You have to have an open mind. The difference is the approach which sees life as a problem to be solved, which a lot of
Mm.
religions throughout history have seen. Um, and the difference is that life is a divine mystery to be lived.
Yes.
And that for a man is is entering the feminine principle. It's becoming softer. It's becoming more, it's letting go, it's surrendering to the fact that, you know, it's a divine mystery. There is the unknowable, you know.
That's
And you
it. It's
have to,
beautifully put, Bodhi. And the relationship equivalent being, going from managing a woman to actually learning how to relate with her, collaborate with her.
yeah, absolutely. I even, these days, um, I'm continuously, uh, you know, um, it's just something that I think is, well, it's just, maybe it's my conditioning that's still there. I'll say, be talking and working with, not anyone I'm intimately related, not a woman that I'm intimately related with, but um, just working with, and she'll say something, she'll have a suggestion, and I'll say, oh no, it's not like that. Don't worry about it. It'll be easy. It'll be this. And, it turns out that she was right. I was like, hey, you were absolutely right. And and when she did express herself in this moment, it was coming from this place of like, it feels like maybe this might happen, and and there's this sort of urge to kind of um, to reassure and to see that, don't worry, I know how things work, and sometimes, sometimes I am right, but I
Sure.
think to live, um, I put it this way for men that are listening, and I guess for anyone, but for me, in opening yourself up to um, this feminine principle and this unlimited potentiality, basically, of life, so that it's not limited by your own ideas of what might happen or what should happen or what has happened in the past. You're sort of just opening yourself up to living each moment and responding not just with your mind and what you know, but with what you feel and what you sense. And um, I think it goes hand in hand with a different kind of spiritual transformation, sort of living in a different, like a matrilineal society. It goes hand in hand with a different kind of spirituality um, and religion. For example, Tibetan Buddhism is the main religion with the Morsor people here in Yunnan.
Mm.
Um, and, I'm sure there's limitations in that as well. Um, but at least they have the fundamental essence of their teaching is that, um, you know, the truth is beyond anything that the mind can grasp,
Yes.
anything that you can, you know, put into a book.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, um, so I think, and I just, what I say to some people about the feminine principle to men, really, is watch and see what happens to your life when you allow the universe to do its thing. We walk around with this idea that we think that, first of all, that we think that we're the doer and that we're doing all the things and that we have to do everything. But, Buddhism, a beautiful part of Buddhism that's come back into my life recently is that nothing in existence has its own individual existence. Nothing exists individually of anything else. Everything is inseparable.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to say or impossible to say that something has that we're not just dealing with only ever dealing with the universe as a whole, right?
Yes.
It's like so, but we walk around as though we are. We walk around as though we can separate things and we can say, oh, that's just work, and we say, oh, that's sometimes we say, oh, that's just sex,
Mm.
um, and we, but my invitation to anyone listening is to see what magic comes into your life when you let go and allow the universe to do its thing. First of all, it's a lot. It's very relaxing. You don't have to be the one who's stressing about outcomes. Obviously, there's still things you do, but the feminine principle, you're not limited anymore by what you think. I guess, and it moves sort of into what we would call trust.
Mm.
Um, Trust is kind of necessary in order to move um, into this sort of dimension of living.
Yes. Yes. So what I hear you pointing to for everyone, Bodhi, is considering a matrilineal way of being um, is about a holistic view of life and actually being part of life rather than just trying to control it. And in the male-female dynamic under patriarchy, it makes sense how men could perceive the way for them to get power and to, you know, succeed in their masculinity is for women to be less free, actually, so they can feel more powerful. And that's where feminism is perceived as the enemy. And to shift out of that power pyramid is necessary to even perceive at all what you're talking about, because it's even beyond man and woman. It's more about returning to an actually natural way of being and living that's in alignment with nature and not against it.
Absolutely. And the nature of nature is constant change.
Yes.
Right? And so if you're coming at nature with your own preconceived idea or imposed, you want to impose something on it, you know, good luck, I guess. um, the only thing that can help you, you know, um, flow with nature and adapt is to keep an open mind,
Yes.
to not judge, to not have this need to control. I think in a big way, um, this need to control life, this
Yes.
desire, or maybe it's a need, or maybe it comes from fear. It's reflected in all things from agriculture to relationships to politics. Um, this need to control life and the need to control women, because a woman is,
Yes.
kind of, you know, um, without I kind of want to play the devil's advocate here just for ease of
Mhm.
communication. This is not what I think, but a woman is moody. A woman is changing all the time. She's
Yep.
listening to her emotions, and her emotions don't follow any kind of um, sort of logical, um, you know, comfortable, predictable kind of way. It's something that it's not a problem that can be solved. A woman is not a problem that can be
Mhm.
solved. Um, it reminds me of a quote from Nietzsche, I think. I think it's him. He says, "What if God was a woman and all your logical attempts to tame her to charm her, sorry, were useless, futile."
What if, hey? And I've noticed how, whatever mystical tradition it is, there's usually their own way of explaining, good luck trying to argue with reality, like this is the root of suffering itself. And
Right.
Bodhi, I want to, I know we need to wind up at some point soon, but this is such an interesting
Mm,
inquiry to me. I
mm.
want to go to the documentary that I saw years ago about the people that you're going to live with. How do I say their name again?
It's more sore.
Warsaw, the Warsaw people.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so something I found really intriguing in it, Bodhi, is how the young women who are from this culture have, probably not all of them, but some of them at least that were interviewed in the documentary, have that grass is greener effect going on in their mind. And they're curious
absolutely.
to live in basically patriarchal society because it's like they don't quite see what they have because they've never known anything else. And I find that dynamic interesting and hilarious and just I can see that the cross-cultural exchange that it sounds like you wish to have there of your immersion, your impact, could really help them, actually.
Exactly. That is a big motivation of mine to want to do this. Um, uh, yeah, because I think a lot of that comes also from the fact that they are extremely rural, extremely remote,
Yeah. Yes.
and like even as far back as like the 80s, um, getting to where they live was so difficult that they would very rarely see anyone from the outside, and they were very pure and kind of naive, and they would constantly get ripped off by the patriarchal tribes that lived closest to them, which was still very far away.
Mm,
And so they developed this idea of the outside world back then, which is like these people are horrible.
mm.
But since then, with technology and they've also had this one. Uh, I'm reading this book at the moment from this woman, um, which is called "Leaving the Woman's Kingdom," because that's what
Mm.
they call the place, the Woman's Kingdom.
Wow.
She was a singer and a successful one, and she left, and now she's living in Dubai. She's
Wow.
old. She's much old. She's much older now. She's been so successful. She's a celebrity in China and stuff. But I think it's the very hard life that they have endured there
Yep.
as a result of being so separated from the rest of everything going on. Um, so yeah, I really feel there's a lot of value um, to be found in this cultural exchange,
Mm.
um, as well because bringing the world to them will and having a kind of dialogue and stuff like this is I think I really just want to see that and support this culture and make greater connections with these people and see where I can help support uh, this culture moving forward, how they integrate into the 21st century, because it's still
Yes.
very, very much a remote place.
Totally. I'm really curious to, I'd love to be able to talk to this woman who's left the queendom and is now in Dubai. That would be so interesting. Um, but I have to mention this too, Bodhi, because I know that women will watch the documentary if they haven't seen it already after our conversation, and they
Sure.
will probably be not all that impressed by the way of life of the women there in the Queendom because it seems like they're really overworked and it's not a super attractive element in the whole picture. And of course, people living very rural and, without modern appliances and things, there's always a lot to do. And the women seem to do the bulk of the work. And, that doesn't seem like a great, yeah, attracting factor, even though the underlying parts are really amazing, especially with the matrilineal focus. Um, what can you share about that from having actually been there yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so there's a couple of things. Firstly, I think the hard life, enduring that kind of, working the fields, growing food, doing a lot of the work is part of a big part of the reason why I think a lot of young women growing up in this society are interested in going elsewhere.
I can
Um,
imagine that for sure. I understand.
well, yeah, yeah. I mean, um, it makes sense. And there's a lot of families that are sort of branching out into um, sort of hotel businesses and building places to sort of access the tourism market of Lugu Lake when people come.
Yeah.
Um, and in a way, it's slowly kind of eroding the matrilineal, the
Mm.
families in a way because the young people kind of are looking around and they say, well, this is we sort of all need money now. We want to live for money now. Is that what we're doing? Okay,
Yeah.
well then it's obviously better for me to go to the city to make money. Like if
Mm.
money is what it's all about, then there's better places to make money and I can go where it's really at.
Oh
Um,
my gosh. I just
so
so many things.
yeah, so it's I know, right? at the moment, what has happened, I think, over the time of um, basically influence of patriarchy, patriarchal nomads over time on this society has slowly, slowly turned it into something very different. It's it was quite a radical thing, and there are places that still exist that are a little bit further away from the tourism sites, which the culture is much more preserved. Um,
Good, good.
but it's to me, it's all about natural incentives and what is really motivating people. Like, for example, what would motivate a man to want to do all this work and help his brothers and his sisters, help his sisters and his mothers? Um, I say mothers, sorry, I keep saying that. I say mothers because a really beautiful part of their culture is that they don't differentiate between aunties and things like that. They just, and or even grandmas. Like obviously, if you ask them specifically, they would tell you that this is my grandma and this is my mother. But they don't differentiate. They use the same word, which is basically just like a mother.
Hmm.
So all the kids growing up, all the aunties are their mother is their mother, their grandma is their mother. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah, so that's just a little side note. Um,
Yes.
yeah, over time, they've kind of had to be less themselves to sort of fit in or not cause too much controversy within patriarchal society. For example, in the past, it used to be a thing of great pride for a woman to have many different lovers. You know, it was
Yeah.
a thing like, it was like, wow, she's a beautiful woman. She has many lovers, you know. It was a thing of great pride in their society. And now it's sort of moving towards, oh no, we're kind of the same as patriarchal society. We're just one lover, and you know, things have changed. And I feel like, um, yeah, I think I would love to play the part in not only making sure that this culture survives, but that it is reawoken and begins to thrive again.
Mm.
And that who knows, you know, it might inspire people to in a in Australia. They might be like, they might come to a similar point of clarity and think, I want to live in a matriarchal culture and start to have these conversations. And what does it
Yes.
look like? Because
Yes.
a matriarchal culture in China is one thing, but what does it look like in the Northern Rivers, for example?
That's
You know?
right. Yes.
And is there a conversation that we have to have with lawmakers in order to see that child rights
Mm.
stay with women and that property rights stay with women? Um, it's obviously it goes against the grain of a lot of things, Christianity being a big one.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, um, where I'm here to,
All of the Abrahamic religions. I think actually in the Jewish one, they actually do acknowledge the mitochondrial matrilineal nature of things, but they're the only one as far as I know.
they're right.
Yeah. Yeah, Bodhi, I would love to speak with you again after you've been immersed in there for a longer time. And I wonder if you'd like to share your vision of what you'd actually be doing there, because I'm definitely a potential client for you. And I imagine many listening could be as well.
Yeah, beautiful. So basically, the beginning of the tour, I think, would start in a place called Dali. Um, this place is as well because where we would go is 2,700 meters above sea level. It's quite an intense shift.
So just
Um,
to frame this, you're organizing tours and or cultural immersions, is that right?
yes, sorry, that's correct. That's where I'm heading with my opening the company and my
Amazing.
life in general at the moment. Uh, so it would start in a place which is about 2,000 meters above sea level in Dali, and it would begin with some general like Chinese culture immersion. So we'd explore tea culture, Tai Chi.
Mm.
There's also potential to have some yoga classes, um, and connect with Chinese locals, young people, um, and we would also go and visit. There are some indigenous, or they call them ethnic minorities. There's lots of ethnic minorities in China. So there's some that are local to Dali, which aren't matrilineal, but they're still very rich in their culture. In the
Sure.
past, I think anthropologists say that in China, all all societies began as matriarchal societies.
Yes.
So that aspect is quite interesting.
Mm.
Um, and so we would visit some places like this. We would also go to some hot springs because there's a hot springs locally to there. And then after some time there, we would make our way to Lugu Lake, which is where the matrilineal society is. And um, we would go do things like enjoying the scenery there. The whole tour would involve times where we meditate together. I think
Mm.
it's quite necessary that we do that as well because there's something about going to a place that's 2,700 meters above sea level and or that specific place, the energy is quite intense there
Sure.
and it can bring things up in people. And
Yes.
I've witnessed it within myself, I've witnessed it in others. It happens. And maybe that is also a contributing factor to their culture. I'm not sure this
Mm.
really stunning place. Um, so yeah, throughout the tour there will be times where we will check in and we will meditate together, and it will be an immersion, but we will all be sort of taking it one step at a time with each other, um, prioritizing everybody's well-being and what's going on for everybody, because we don't want anyone to be left behind. And there can be a lot of things with cultural shocks and cultural differences that can lead to that kind of a situation.
Yes.
Um, but then we will be, I hope to make some connections with like an official connection with a Warsaw family who is willing to host us. And there are some that exist. I just haven't had the time to visit them and have this kind of discussion.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll be able to go and have a meal and experience their in their courtyard. And there's also potential that in future there could be staying a few nights with their family and seeing their day to day and helping them and things like this.
Mm.
Uh, but in general, a beautiful part of their culture is if you imagine a big lake in these lush green mountains, and scattered around this lake are a whole bunch of different little villages. And each village, the whole village, or many people in the village will come together every night at 7:30 and have a fire dance kind of evening.
Wow. Huh.
And it's really beautiful. They get all dressed up in their traditional clothes, and they have this beautiful song, and they sort of all hold hands and have this sort of dance with specific steps and stuff, and it's just gorgeous and so
Part
much
of it
fun.
in the documentary, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I also have my own footage too that I plan to begin sharing things in this vein of on Facebook and stuff, and
Great.
it's just beautiful. It's fun. After they perform for us, you get up and you join them, and it's it's I can't help it whenever I go there, I have this giant smile on my face the whole time. It's just so much fun.
Bodhi,
Mm.
it's such a beautiful vision that you have, and I love that you're initiating this for people. It sounds like they'd be having the chance to unlearn patriarchy and hyper individualism along the way, and the elevated location is like you have to adjust to an elevated level of consciousness, basically. And yeah, it sounds like it's no surprise that they're living the way that they are in that altitude. you know?
Yeah, it's really beautiful. It's beautiful to see and have an idea of what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman outside of our own patriarchal, patrilineal ideas because I think it's very easy to say that there's a lot of confusion in Western society and society in general
Yes.
throughout the world. Um, so yeah, I
Yeah.
look forward to hosting hosting a lot of people who are interested to come and experience this. And yeah, I'm organizing at the moment. I'm this afternoon going to talk to a couple of agents to help open a company and things. So I've got lots of work to do, but it's something that
Mhm.
yeah, something that I'm very passionate about. So it doesn't feel like work.
Yes, absolutely. I love that you have this passion. And yeah, I'd love to have the chance to talk to you at a later date to hear how it's all going. But I suspect that I may find out for myself in the meantime as well. I might come over.
Cool, definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for yeah for having this conversation. I couldn't help but reach out when I saw the title of your podcast because being a Scorpio uh, and my current interests, two of the things that I really enjoy talking about patriarchy, matriarchy, and sex. So
And we
yeah,
didn't even get all the way into that, so we'll save that for another time, my fellow
no
Scorpio.
worries, no worries. We'll get there. Cool.
Thank you, Bodhi. Thank you for sharing this episode if it's moved you, and know that saving or sharing it around, it genuinely helps to spread this message and also to attract more interesting speakers to join the Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversations. And there is much more to come, so keep tuning into these weekly episodes so that we can all be part of shifting division into connection for ourselves and for the coming generations.